Rikers Island exposed. Violence, corruption, survival. The island of broken promises. Just a few miles from Manhattan's glittering skyline lies a place few dare to look too closely at. A place where New York City hides its darkest failures. Rikers Island. For decades, it's been a world of violence, corruption, and survival. A jail so infamous it's become a symbol of everything broken in America's justice system. This isn't just a jail. It's a machine of suffering. Over the next hour, we'll take you inside, through riots, corruption scandals, gang wars, and the fight to survive another day. This is the story of Rikers Island. Exposed. Before it became a prison, Rikers was nothing but swampland. Bought by the city in the 1800s, it was supposed to solve overcrowding in Manhattan's old jails. But what began as a promise of progress quickly turned into a nightmare. By 1932, the first jail opened here. Concrete walls replaced the swamp, and with them came decades of chaos. In the 1970s and 80s, as crime rates soared in New York, Rikers became the dumping ground for the city's problems. At its peak, more than 20,000 inmates were crammed inside facilities meant for far fewer. Cells built for one man often held three. Violence was inevitable. Rikers isn't like most jails. It's not meant for long sentences. Most people here are pre-trial, not convicted. But that doesn't make it safer. For many, a few months at Rikers feels like a death sentence. Corruption spread fast. Officers smuggled in drugs, weapons, and cell phones. In exchange, gangs ruled entire housing units. The line between jailer and prisoner blurred, and violence became business as usual. You had to pick a side. Bloods, Latin Kings, Trinitarios. If you didn't, you were a target. I saw guys get cut just for walking in the wrong day room. Behind every statistic was a person. Rikers wasn't just holding blood on the tiers. In Rikers, violence doesn't wait. It comes fast, without warning, in the blind corners of a tier or the shadows of a day room. Officers were supposed to maintain control, but often they were outnumbered, unprepared, or complicit. In 2012, officers were accused of running what inmates called the program. Prisoners who disobeyed rules weren't just disciplined, they were beaten, often with guards turning their backs, sometimes even orchestrating the assaults. Money flowed in from the outside. Drugs, cell phones, and even weapons slipped past security. For the right price, correction officers looked the other way. For gangs, it meant absolute control of their housing units. Everybody knew the rules. If you were neutral, you were prey. If you joined a crew, you were safe. But you owed them everything. Protection came with a price, and blood was the currency. Shanks made from toothbrushes, razors melted into plastic, locks stuffed into socks. Violence wasn't random. It was structured, strategic. Every tier was a battlefield with its own rules. By the late 2000s, assaults inside Rikers averaged 1 every 3 hours. Guards assaulted inmates. Inmates assaulted guards. And inmates assaulted each other. The jail was a powder keg, always one spark away from chaos. The deaths piled up. Kalief Browder, a teenager held for 3 years without trial, much of it in solitary confinement. His story shocked the world, but inside Rikers, it was one of many. Too many. For the men and women trapped here, the fight wasn't just against others, it was against despair. Suicide rates soared, mental health resources collapsed, and all the while, the city promised reform, promises that rarely reached the tiers. From the outside, it looks like just another jail, but those who lived it or lost loved ones inside know the truth. Rikers is more than a jail. It's a scar. One New York City has struggled and failed to heal. Corruption cover-ups. For decades, New York City leaders promised reform, but behind the walls of Rikers, corruption thrived. Reports of brutality and neglect surfaced again and again. only to be buried under bureaucracy, excuses, and outright cover-ups. Officers smuggled in drugs, weapons, even food, all for the right price. With thousands of dollars circulating weekly, corruption wasn't an exception. It was business. Investigations revealed missing records, falsified reports, and shredded evidence. When inmates died under suspicious circumstances, official stories often blamed the victims themselves. Security cameras were mysteriously turned off. Logs were altered. Even when violence was caught on tape, the footage often vanished before investigators could review it. In 2012, a lawsuit uncovered a brutal system run by correction officers known as the program. Inmates were forced to enforce discipline on others. Those who resisted were beaten, with the tacit approval of the guards. It was violence outsourced. No case exposed corruption more than Kalief Browder's. Arrested at 16. Accused of stealing a backpack, he spent 3 years at Rikers awaiting trial. 2 of them in solitary confinement. Kalief was never convicted of a crime. When his case was finally dismissed, the damage was already done. Kalief came home, but he was never the same. Rikers broke him. It breaks so many. The outrage sparked investigations. A federal monitor was appointed in 2015, describing Rikers as unconstitutional and out of control. Yet even under federal watch, the violence and corruption continued. On paper, reforms looked promising. New training, oversight, millions spent on safety. But inside the walls, officers and inmates alike knew the truth. Rikers was too far gone. Reform was a word. Survival was reality. Survival of the fittest. At Rikers, every step, every look, every word mattered. Survival meant learning the code fast. Sit in the wrong spot, bump the wrong person, even glance too long. And you could pay in blood. First thing I told him was, don't talk too much. Don't ask for nothing. Keep your back to the wall. And never ever eat alone. Inside, newcomers quickly learned the unspoken rules. There was no manual, no guide, just whispers, warnings, and hard lessons. Gangs controlled everything: phones, beds, food, even protection. If you wanted safety, you paid. If you couldn't, you were prey. The strong thrived. The weak disappeared into silence. Phones were lifelines and weapons. Control of a phone meant control of communication with the outside world. Entire fights erupted over a few stolen minutes of talk time. Every morning, you woke up wondering, is today the day I get cut? Everybody carried razors. Some hid them in their mouths. That's how normal it was. For those in solitary confinement, the box. Survival meant facing a different enemy. Time. Days bled into weeks, weeks into years. The silence crushed men as surely as the violence. Food was another battle. Rotten meat, moldy bread. Sometimes meals came hours late. For many, commissary became the real currency. Ramen, tuna, candy, more valuable than cash. Survival wasn't just about strength, it was preparation. Every inmate had a plan, a weapon hidden, an ally nearby, an exit route mapped out in their mind. For families, survival meant hope. Hope that their loved ones would come out alive. Hope that tomorrow's headlines wouldn't carry their child's name. Inside, inmates fought to survive each day. Outside, families fought to be heard. But the walls of Rikers silenced both. Survival here wasn't just about living. It was about enduring and never forgetting. The riots that shook Rikers. Rikers has seen countless fights, but when the tension boiled over, violence became uncontrollable. Whole dorms exploded into riots. Eruptions so fierce that even riot gear and batons weren't enough to restore order. In 1990, a massive brawl broke out that left nearly 50 people injured. The jail went into lockdown, but it was far from the last time Rikers would burn. Many riots were orchestrated by gangs. Leaders used chaos as leverage, bargaining chips for better conditions, or to send a brutal message of dominance. When it started, you knew you had seconds. If you weren't near the exit, you were trapped. We were outnumbered 10-1. The city tried to downplay it, calling them incidents instead of riots. But for those inside, they were full-scale wars. And no one, inmate or officer, walked away unchanged. Every riot added to Rikers' legend and its shame. Each one another reminder that control was an illusion, order a fragile mask over chaos. Eventually, the pressure became impossible to ignore. Politicians promised closures. Federal monitors demanded reform. Advocates called Rikers a human rights disaster. And yet, the island still stands. Rikers is more than a jail. It's a wound, one carried by inmates, officers, families, and a city that struggles to decide, punish or reform, shut down or survive. And that is the legacy of Rikers Island. A legacy written in violence, corruption, and survival.